We divided it into 5 sections. I'm not going to take up time discussing those sections, but just to introduce you to the notion of the camera in the early years, what it focused on, and how it moved away from original commitments to a wider framework. In particular, I will share with you the problems, as I said, the problems and the joys. The problems were in gleaning enough photographs of working class women. As you know, working class women form the backbone of our economy and have done so for centuries. But they were never the victims, if you wish to call it, or the clients, or the individuals before the camera, until quite recently, when there has been some attempt to record working class women. Even in the 1880s, it was actually earlier, about 1860s, there was a big project by the first Viceroy of India, Lord Canning, the People of India project, whereby ethnographic photographs of women and men, 460, were produced in 8 large volumes. But over there, the ethnographic photograph objectified the woman as the ayah, the woman as the carer, the woman, or even things like the Madras beauty, etc. So these were typifications, not really giving you an idea of what working class women were actually doing. So when we started this project, it was very important for us to have a database, a visual base of women, of working class women. So I'm going to show you just a few visuals and tell you how difficult it was actually to get them. This was a postcard we managed to get in Chor Bazaar in Bombay, and it says "Salams from India." It could have been a child prostitute, could have been the daughter of a domestic servant, but clearly somebody who was asked to pose for a photograph. And at the same time, you will notice that she is doing a salam, but at the same time, her left hand is akimbo, and there is a sort of a denial between the left and the right, almost, that there is subservience in the right part of her body, but left hand, there is a certain amount of self-assertion.
It's actually by sheer chance. I'm really going to talk to you about one photograph, and it is about women. So it's by lucky coincidence that Malavika talked about her project of visual histories through photography, the subject being women. I've worked with, I'm a photographer and a graphic designer myself, but I've worked with a number of historians and some of the very prominent historians in India. And I've always asked them why, in their history practice, these are all people who work with texts. Very few have really gone into the visual archives. And we do have really remarkable visual archives in India because we have a very early photography history. Photography in India starts virtually right after its development in France and in England. In the 19th century, we have an extremely rich body of work right from the 19th century through the freedom movement and through the post-Nehruvian and modern Indian years. But historians have somehow not plunged into this visual history. And I'm really going to talk about the significance of the still image. This is actually a very small part of a little talk that I had done earlier, basically for an art crowd. Because I still believe that the still image has an iconic power which is very powerful. Unlike cinema or video, which is a little more ephemeral, that has an effect when you see a film, but you don't remember the entire film. You might remember a memory of the film or an emotion that it had caused, but you do not necessarily remember the film as a whole. Whereas a still image, you can still capture, the brain can still capture that. And I had started with this image of Kutubuddin Ansari. Probably all have seen this. And my point with an image like this was that it probably in the last 10 or 20 years, this is the single most seen image in India. And that this image actually became the defining image of the Gujarat pogroms, which happened in 2002.
I'm really going to go back to what was there in our visual histories before photography, because I had presumed that both Ram and Malavika would have filled you in on the great photographs of, say, Raja Deen Dayal and other great early photographers in India. Can somebody operate this for me? Thank you. Okay. Most history is sort of confined to historical texts, but I think that many historical texts can be extremely dry. And what early illustrations and paintings have done is to flesh out the background, the ambience, the clothes, the mores, the habits and customs, the games that people played, the costumes of course, generally kings and queens. So we go back. I have not gone back into sculpture because that would have actually taken us back much, much further into visual histories of India, especially sculptures in stone, which have lasted for many centuries. But I've confined this now to paintings, and we start with a painting from the Babar-Nama, and that's early 16th century. And here you see very clearly the very mongoloid features of Babar and the two men who are sitting in this. I don't know, I think one of them is Babar. Their costumes and their very Mongol features, which, as you'll see later on, become more and more Indianized. Next one. There again is a very beautiful early 16th century painting from the Babar-Nama. And you see the robes, the costumes, of course there was no perspective, so he seems to be sitting on a very plain carpet.